So today we're talking about A Course in Miracles, which helps me to heal my mind, which is a beautiful thing. Because every day I wake up and I have a good idea, and then I, thank God, have a little practice and I see that God has a great idea. And if I let go of my little good idea, that I get to have God's great idea. And that's the whole process, this whole process that helps me to build trust and tolerance for a greater good. Because we self-resourceful Jersey girls like myself, we who have lived by the sweat of our own brow, we who have lived by stories of martyrdom, we have a hard time accepting that, the opposite of things are bad and then you die. We actually live that in so many corners and crevices of our lives, that life is hard and then you die. and and it just simply does not have to be true. We could gently step into the possibility that there is a plan that God has for you that's beautiful, that's impeccable, that's gentle, that's kind, that's loving. God does not need martyrs. God is looking for miracle workers. So it's not always easy because we like to make plans. We like to make our funny little plans of martyrdom. We make plans and God laughs, But the good news is that we, through the Course in Miracles, can begin to see things differently. The ego doesn't want us to know that we could see things differently. But the different way of seeing the idea that we make plans and God laughs is that God makes plans and we laugh. God makes plans and we laugh because God's plans actually delight us. That's how you know you're waking up, because you're laughing. I think it's Deepak Chopra says there's two steps, two symptoms, two signs that you're waking up. And one is that you stop worrying, that you have this lighthearted, joyful experience. And then the other one is that you start seeing like meaningful coincidences and synchronicities, you know. So those are two steps. And that you're laughing, that it's joyful, that love goes hand in hand with laughter, that love and laughter are like, two horny teenagers that you can't pull apart. Yes, I just said that. So A Course in Miracles is all about helping us to heal our minds. It's about, just like what Kathy was saying, like it's a happy plan. It's not a hard plan, it's a happy plan. And in the Course in Miracles, it says to do that a healed mind does not plan. It carries out the plan it receives through listening to the wisdom that is not its own. So most people in A Course in Miracles, or who begin to study A Course in Miracles, they go, a healed mind doesn't plan. Like, how do you not plan? But it goes on, the sentence goes on, and it says it carries out the plan, the happier, greater plan, by listening, and then to wisdom that's not its own. So to develop that internal conversation with your own intuition, with your own divine, with your own internal wisdom, to listen really to that, to use that internal compass. Many times when people think of miracles or speak of miracles, they often are speaking of like a spontaneous healing. They'll say like, I had cancer and then I prayed and then I went to the doctor and the cancer was gone and it's a miracle. Or they'll say like, I had a financial disability and I looked in, I prayed and then I looked into the mailbox and there was a check there that just came out of the blue for the exact amount that I was looking for, and it's a miracle. And these things are cool and they can happen. Like I was saying to our friend Sheree, like you can manifest. You all are magnificent manifestors, all worthy of that kind of magic. But all of those things live on the level of form. And we don't want to work in form when we can play in consciousness. We don't want to work in form when we can play in consciousness. Why? Because we don't want to spend our time. We don't want to spend our precious resource of time solving problems like cancer and poverty. And I know that might sound like disingenuous, but the truth is, like, we could do it easier. There's an easier way of going about it. We want to develop a consciousness that doesn't have problems. If we continue to solve problems at the level of the problem, we'll continue to rotate the flavors of our problems and we'll just have problem du jour. If we want to spend our time seeing problems, we'll block the miracles and we'll begin to build walls of all of these grievances of how things are not working for you, which is our prerogative if we want to do that. It's also our projection, but it's definitely our prerogative, but it's not the optimal use of our time. So we want to develop a way of seeing peace and possibilities so that we can extend miracles. There's a principle in A Course in Miracles, principle 15, and it says each day should be devoted to miracles. What does that mean? It says the purpose of time is to enable you to learn how to use time constructively. So the purpose of time is to learn how to use time constructively. Problem solving is not a constructive use of your time. I know that sounds odd, but problem solving is not a constructive use of your time in the same way that chasing shadows around the Grand Canyon, not a constructive use of your time. The sun is always going to move. There's always going to be new shadows. There's always going to be new problems. If you want to be a shadow chaser, you can keep yourself very busy out there. Or you could have peace instead of this. You could decide that you want to use time constructively. You could decide that you want to use time constructively, and that's where everything changes. Because time's purpose is actually to extend love, no problems, unless, of course, you want to have problems. So if time's use is just to extend love, then we have to make sure that we move out of the way any idea of this is a problem, because you can't give what you don't have. So we have to develop this loving, miracle-minded mindset. That's where we get to play with each other. That's where we don't take anything too seriously or too personally. And I know that sometimes this can sound like theory and almost slightly esoteric, but it's actually very applicable. It's very applicable. This type of radical shift in consciousness can come through the working of the programs of, say, the 12-step or Course in Miracles, but not just by reading the books and not just by discussing the books, because we have seen people in the world, and in all sorts of spiritual programs and practices, 12-step and Course in Miracles even, where there is a memorization of the book, but there's not a drop of peace in the bank, if you know what I mean. We've seen people like that. And in 12-step, the idea is to be happy, joyous, and free, and you go into sometimes to rooms where people aren't really any of those things, and so it doesn't make it look like this program works. But that's because the book is being read, but the principles are not being applied. So when it comes to spiritual practice, we need to do more than just discuss and discover. We need to apply and embody if we want the principles to work, or at least make an earnest attempt to apply and embody. And if you're not going to do that, I would say don't even pick up the book, because that would be really frustrating. If you really want to stay at the level of the problem, and if you want to hold on to your problems, don't pick up the book, because that would just cause you more problems. Because if you're invested in problems, you'll see problems everywhere. You will absolutely see problems, even in A Course in Miracles, even in the 12-step program. You'll just say, that don't work for me. It's not for me, which is interesting. I think it's interesting. So A Course in Miracles does not attempt to teach us anything. It doesn't attempt to make us be anything differently than what we already are. It simply invites us to see everything differently. In fact, the workbook begins with a really simple lesson. And the very first lesson is nothing I see means anything. And I know that sounds crazy, but just take a good long hit off of that truth pipe. Nothing I see means anything. So we get to go into it. We get to go into all of the meaning that we've made of everything. You need to be like this needs to be like that needs to sound like this. And if it doesn't, then I've made some meaning out of it, and it's going to be very disturbing to my mind. So we have to practice coming open-minded. If you were to work even one lesson of A Course in Miracles and not even move forward to the other 364 lessons, if you were really about embodying even just one lesson, your life would take on a real radical shift, and you would probably demonstrate a more palpable and peaceful glow. That's what I've noticed for people who actually work the lessons. So let me break it down a little bit. Humans have 5 simple, basic senses, right? They have touch, they have sight, they have hearing, they have smell, we have taste. These are our 5 senses. and they are limited, and that's the key word, is limited. So these senses, they send information to the brain. It helps us to understand and perceive the world around us. And from these faulty data gatherers, we make up our own perception. We say, this is how the world is. This is how people are. This is how cats and dogs are. This is how priests and politicians are. These are how hot dogs and hamburgers are. We just begin to make things meaning. We give meaning to things. Senses are the seat of our perception, or our perception. We say like, well, I've seen it, so it must be true. I've tasted it, so this is what's true. I've heard this, so this is true, and we kind of condemn people to what we think of them and with a meaning we've made up. Like, you're a mean person. I saw you do mean things, case closed. Like, that's how you're going to be stamped for all of eternity, because the ego doesn't like to look back in. The ego doesn't like to reevaluate. The ego likes to say, I know it, I saw it, it's done. Whereas the Holy Spirit invites us to keep things open. In fact, it says in the Course of Miracles, I don't know what anything is for. If I think that I've seen this thing, what I don't see is I don't see the workings of my own filters and the glitches in my own system. If I have a problem, it's not you or the hot dog or the hamburger or the cat or the dog. If I have a problem, I have a problem. And I can be sure that I'm not actually seeing. I'm seeing through the filters of my own programming, and believe it or not, my senses will support me in continuing to see what I have believed in, what I value. You don't believe it when you see it. You actually see it because you have believed in it. And I've noticed this throughout my own journey. Being in a theater company, I would sit around in this great room of actors, and somebody would put up a piece of work, and the same guy who would say that wasn't sexy enough, and this would say that every time, and the same woman who would say you weren't loud enough would say that every time, and the same person who would say you didn't raise the stakes there. It was like everyone was seeing through their same filters. The same person who was like, I think you could be funnier, same filters, so it wasn't really the piece. The piece was sort of neutral, but everyone around it was seeing what they wanted to project on the piece. So that's how we do it in life. You go to a wedding with somebody and they'll say the bride was ugly, the food was cold, and the toast went on forever. And you could be thinking I thought the bride was beautiful and that meal was the best. You know what I mean? It's all your perception. So the Course in Miracles says that you do not seem to doubt the world you see. You do not really question what is shown to you through the body's eyes, nor do you ask why you even believe in it, even though that you have learned a while since that your senses do deceive, and that you believe them to the last detail, which they report is even stranger. When you pause to recollect how frequently they have been faulty witnesses indeed, why would you trust them so implicitly? Why? But because of underlying doubt, which you would hide with a show of certainty. So, what is the underlying doubt? The underlying doubt is that God is capable and love is effective. I doubt it. That all is well and working together for my highest and greatest good. I doubt it. So, that's what we need to heal. We need to heal that doubt. So this January 1st, we're going to kick off another round of miracles. That means, Miracles Live 365, which is a community within our community. It's called Miracles Live 365, and it's where a lot of the people who are here today meet every morning for a spiritual practice using the workbook of A Course in Miracles. The workbook has 365 lessons. We do one each day. We've been doing it for, I think this is our 9th or 10th year, and maybe our 20th or 25th round, because we do a couple rounds a year. So each year we go into those same principles and we practice the principles. But again, it's not the touched by an angel type of miracles. These are the things that don't happen to us. These are the things that happen through us. And when we make that shift, it's a real and radical shift that takes on, that actually shifts the internal landscape. So you might think to yourself, getting up every day, practicing together every day, like Christmas and New Year's and St. Patrick's Day and the day after St. Patrick's Day for some of us, that would be what? I can't do that. I have a job, I have kids, I have a family, I have an addiction to sleeping in, whatever it is, whatever flavor you have. And I would say I get it. I too have had 1,000 forms of resistance. And I thought, just like you, that was not for me. In fact, there was a time in my life when I had when I had like no spiritual practice. Like one day a week I would journal, or sometime in the month I would do yoga, or I would sometimes meditate. And so I get that. So I was not in any way, shape, or form a great candidate to help lead people through, or community through the workbook of Course in Miracles. But the interesting thing that happens, even while you're sitting on the circumference of your own spirituality, is that God doesn't call the qualified, she qualifies the called. She qualifies the called. And if you feel called, what I would say is try not to struggle too much. Try not to drag your feet too much, which I did. So here's a little side note. In our community, I speak of God with the feminine pronoun because I can, and it helps me to engage in a more inclusive language. And I think that God likes it, because recently I was reading this book by Richard Rohr, who says that God loves things by becoming them. And so God becomes a woman in my mind, and God becomes a dog in my mind, and God becomes a husband in my mind, a neighbor, a politician, a man with a gun, a child in the street. God is, and God is, and God is, and God is. And I have ceased and attempt to cease to have special grounds and special ground rules for what God looks like when God walks the world in a million disguises. And so I speak of God. When I speak of God, I use all of the forms and figures and pronouns that I like to use. But when I read A Course in Miracles or any other page that's written, in the masculine, I just read it the way it is so that I don't wrestle with what is, From the 12 step, I learned, back in the day, that I can accept the things I cannot change, which is how other people write or speak of God. I can have the courage to change the things I can, which is the way I write and speak about God. And I can develop the wisdom to know the difference. God qualifies the call. Like I said in the beginning, like God's plan is so much more beautiful than what we could ever imagine, like so much more beautiful. The idea of this program that we do together every morning is that it just came into being. It was a thing that came into being. Like we didn't really plan to have it happen, In fact, I attempted for it not to happen, I think that God was probably looking for a community of people to lead through the Course in Miracles workbook lessons, and thought like maybe the speakeasy would be a good place. And it was always live, Miracles Live 365. It was always a live call, but it wasn't always 365. It started with just 21 days. And that's how willing I was. So if you feel like around your own spiritual practice that you really don't have much willingness, like I sat right next to you, like I was like 21 days and then I'm done. So I wasn't really willing to do more than that. But then when asked to continue, we got through 21 days and people were like, let's go the distance. I had established a relationship with my internal teacher, my dear divine. And I asked, like, am I supposed to bring people through the lessons of A Course in Miracles? And at that point, I did get a really clear answer. It was 5 words. And it still makes me laugh. But it was like, I was like, am I supposed to do this? And it said, do you have better plans? And I was like, damn, I don't, What I love about that answer is that it was so generous and so clear. It was so clear, like, really? Like, do you have better plans? And then it was also so generous. It was like, Maureen, like, we're going to do this. And if you have better plans, like, we'll listen to what you've got going on. So tell us what you've got. And I was like, I got nothing over here. I love to plan, probably as you love to plan, but I just didn't have a better plan. I just couldn't come up with one. And I guess only a fool would take that bait anyhow. Like, you got a better plan than God. So it was basically that simple. And I think that when something is simple, like I really believe when something's easy and simple, that is part of the plan of God. I mean, it is so simple that even a child could do it. And in fact, we have, a couple kids who are on the calls sometimes. This one girl, Maddie, who I love, and her mom, Lisa, she's been on the call for a while. And I love that, like a couple of years ago, she was like 10, she stood up in our community and she's like, I listened with my mom. And, when I first started listening, I didn't really understand it, but then I just kept listening and now I get it. And now I share it with my friends. I was like, oh my Lord, this is the most beautiful moment in my life, And I remember thinking, like, I am so damn glad that Maureen Muldoon didn't have better plans, You can put that on my tombstone. Maureen Muldoon, she didn't have better plans. So now we have people, now we have kids, and now we have people who have been on since the very beginning. We have moms getting up with their kids and listening in. We have husbands and wives. We have people from across the country. We have people from other countries. We have a global community of Course in Miracles students and teachers. It started with 2 people, me and Bonnie. you know? And now we have 13 different teachers, several teachers in training as well. And so it's kind of it's kind of amazing to see things grow from love. Just like the daily round of getting up and just doing a simple little thing like a practice together. So that's the form. That's easy to talk about the form, but it's harder to talk about the content of A Course in Miracles. It's hard to explain how the Course actually works. You kind of have to experience it. But I do have a story that I usually tell around this time of year that I think is helpful in regards to understanding the possibility of the transformation that happens when you do any spiritual practice. So, and sometimes before the new year, people think like, this is going to be my year that I meditate, or this will be my year that I do the course lessons, or this will be my year of yoga, whatever it is. So this is what I know about a diligent practice. And the good news is that this is something that you've already experienced before. It's a story about transformation. It's a story about making the dying more vital. It's a story about bringing hope to the weary. And it's actually about an old scrap of newspaper. Uh, it's kind of my own poetic version of like what can be possible when you surrender into God's plan. So have you ever seen like an old scrap of newspaper in a windy day and it gets like danced in the wind? And have you ever seen that and thought to yourself like, wow, it's so beautiful. It's like, kind of like this amazing show and it happens when you least expect it, and it's hard to value something so sort of spontaneous, but because on the surface really we know it's just like a scrap of old newspaper twisting and turning and twirling in the wind. And yet oddly there's something magnificent about it. And maybe in that moment when you saw this trash taking on a graceful tone, maybe you thought to yourself, like, I wonder if anyone else is like seeing this beautiful moment, this odd throwaway scrap of newspaper. Maybe you thought that it was odd that you should be so mesmerized by this traveling trash, you know? Like that you got still enough to notice this beautiful, maybe even sometimes it's like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. And yet it's also hard to deny the feeling of wonder, you know. And we watch this paper take flight and perform this solo dance just for you. And as you take in the dance of the old newspaper in the wind, you may even feel within yourself like an odd appreciation of something mysterious, miraculous, beautiful that you can't really put words to. That newspaper is you. That newspaper is me. That newspaper is showing us what it looks like to surrender into God's plan. When we let go and we allow ourselves to be used for God's plan, it's nothing short of stunning. Even if the ingredients are odd, this trashy dance is actually our most optimal state of being. And I'm sure you never thought about that, you know, your most optimal state is being a trashy, an old scrap of throwaway newspaper, but bear with me. That old newspaper didn't know that it had a second life. You know, it didn't know that it was a dancer. It was very likely that it was even afraid of heights or afraid of visibility or afraid to dance with the wind, afraid of its vitality. And so it settled for its lot in life. It simply delivered bad news to bored people, and then it was done. And then one day, when it thought it was completely over, when it thought its purpose was through, that's when the cosmic orchestration of the universe stepped in and used it, lifted it into the air, twirled it, swirled it into this immaculate choreography, and demonstrated for you its secret mysteries and ministries. This is the second breath of God that we all get to inhale when we have a spiritual practice. This is the second breath of God that lives in everything. This is the second breath of God. And it's only a small example of what's possible for you when you surrender into it. Now, the good news of your life gets to be transformed into art. You know, even the bad news of your life gets to be transformed into art. Isn't that immaculate? The old news of your life gets to be experienced and expressed in such a surprising and beautiful way. The old news of your life gets to be recycled as a means to bring, you know, hope to weary eyes. What could be more desirable than that? So the Course in Miracles says a healed mind doesn't plan. It carries out the plan that it receives from wisdom that is not its own. There are 1,000 more dances in your bones, 1,000 more songs, 1,000 more spectacular events. We can't spend our beautiful time chasing problems or shadows. We have to begin to practice our own enlightenment and invest in it. Because not just for your own good, but because you're here to lift the gaze of the weary and perform miracles. And that's the word.
Hey, thanks, Maureen. Here I am, standing on the corner, watching lovers hand in hand as they pass me by and I talk to God. I place my order for the perfect match for me, wonder when it will arrive. Why do I always seem to go through time, reading into everything between the lines? Love is always easier for someone else to waiting for my miracle to come. There are two girls who live across the street. One is big and burly, and her sister is petite. She's born with it, doesn't even notice or appreciate the notion she's got it pretty sweet. Why do some people get their faces slapped while others have the aces fall into their lap? Everything is easier for someone else to waiting for my miracle to come, waiting for my miracle, 'cause anything is possible, everything is cyclical, and my turn could be coming round, could be any minute now. The sun is poking through that cloud, gonna catch my ray of sun, I'm waiting for my miracle to come. So here I sit, staring at the TV, watching ordinary people who just won the lottery, holding a check it takes four of them to carry. They are blinking at the flashbulbs, I wonder why it isn't me. I always wished I'd find a pearl, one of these oyster shells, but that shit only happens to somebody else. Everything is easier for someone else, still waiting for my miracle to come, waiting for my miracle, 'cause anything is possible, everything is cyclical, and my turn could be coming round, could be any minute now. The sun is poking through that cloud, gonna catch my ray of sun, I'm waiting for my miracle to come. I'm waiting for my miracle. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for my miracle. I'm waiting for my miracle.
Great job. Beautiful. That's your original, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's from The Road to Bliss, my
See?
Grammy nominated CD. Did I ever show
Yeah.
you my Grammy nomination before? They don't give
No,
you
give
don't
us
get
a
a stamp.
peek. Hold on one second. There you go. Wow.
40,
Oh, wait. Why is it going to you? Hold on.
46th annual Grammy nominee. And
I
it's got a
love it.
picture of a Grammy on the back of it, which is almost just as good.
That's awesome. That is awesome. It is just as good. It's
Yeah.
better because you can wear it around your neck and
Yeah,
let
now
everyone
everybody can
see
know.
it.
You'd look really stupid wearing a Grammy
You would.
around your neck, but
You
in
really
that
would.
that looks pretty normal. It's kind
Yeah, you really did. And they're making it easy for you.
Totally.
That's awesome. Congratulations again on that well-deserved award. There are many
you.
in your future. I'm looking forward to celebrating each and every one of them.